there are several ways we can diversify revenue. For instance, we can also diversify your audience. So I'd like to spend some time on the topic of B2B commercial painting. But why, right? So like because most agencies who only target the residential space, we have a dedicated commercial marketing program. So that's what makes us a bit unique, but that's also what makes us have some leverage in this industry. We have a lot of data around this, right? And our program is really designed to introduce our clients to contacts that can exponentially increase revenue just from one relationship, right? And again, because we're a data-driven company, we have the ability to speak on this topic. And here's what makes commercial work interesting. It follows the same follows a completely different demand curve of the residential market. So when retirement homes need rooms repainted, they don't care what time of the year it is, or when a general contractor is wrapping up an office building, they don't care if it's around the holidays, right? They need the work done. And again, this is another tool that you can add to your tool belt. So to help facilitate this conversation, I'd like to bring in a few industry titans. First of all, Soren, I appreciate you sticking around here today. I also have Matt and Maggie, owners of Harpeth Painting. They are a $10 million residential and commercial painting empire out of Nashville, Tennessee. Um, I've had the pleasure of interviewing both Matt and Maggie separately on our podcast, which if you guys haven't checked out yet, basecoatmarketing.com/podcast, I highly recommend going and listening to those interviews. You're going to hear more from those two rock stars today, so I'm really excited about that. I also have Jeff Cornwall, he has a PhD. He's a former professor and spent over 50 years as a serial entrepreneur. Jeff is also a business advisor of mine. He's advisor to the board of directors at the PCA and also happens to be Maggie's father. Just genetically, I've got some great people on this call today. And finally, I got Chad Cisco with H&H Painting. Chad formerly worked at Sherwin-Williams. He joined H&H as a project manager back in 1998, and he worked his way up to buying the company in 2008 to help propel them to over $10 million in annual commercial painting alone. So guys, throw some emojis, some numbers in the comments here. I'm fired up for this conversation today. Guys, first of all, thank you all for being here.
Happy to be here.
For the invite.
All right. So I want to start with you, Jeff, who's not a painter. Jeff, you and I have had a number of conversations around the commercial industry and what makes it so different than residential. And you coach painting contractors. So I want to start with you, Jeff, and just kind of start off with like, why is the painting industry so different between residential and commercial? Where do most guys get it wrong?
I think for me, this is a common mistake I see in a lot of businesses across multiple industries is there's an assumption that my business model will work for any audience, for any kind of market. And it doesn't work that way. I've worked with a lot of restaurateurs who think that, well, I cook so I can go into catering and it'll be just as easy. And they don't understand the unique pressures of catering corporate events and weddings and things like that. It's not as drastic necessarily when you go from residential to commercial, but there are some fundamental differences that happen in terms of how you interact with the client, how you get the client, even the kind of employees that work best within that client base. And so it's not a completely new business, but it's much more different than I think people realize. And again, I see this across multiple industries when people try to diversify and go into other things. When I was in education, a lot of universities thought, well, we do education, so we'll go into corporate training. And many of them failed miserably because they didn't understand the expectations and demands of that audience. So it's a move where you really have to learn the customers and their expectations and what they want out of the relationship with you as a provider company.
Yeah. Matt and Maggie, you guys, can you give me a breakdown, and I don't care whoever wants to speak up first here, of your business, Harpeth Painting, what percentage of your business comes from commercial versus the residential? And I believe you guys dictate that like residential new builds fall under commercial, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, ish, sure. we so we are pretty split 50-50 with true residential and true commercial. And that's looking at it as new res and res repaint under residential. So we're about half and half. So I think we're on track to do about 6 million in commercial this year.
So where do you find, like, if any overlap? Like, do you use the same crews between the two? Do you have the same processes? Like, where's the overlap between res and commercial, and where are the big differentiating factors? We can talk through like relational sales versus transactional sales and all that, but let's start simple with the commonality between the two, and then the big differences between the two.
So I think when we started out, it was a little easier to have cross-functional teams between the residential and commercial divisions. So I think that's a great way to enter that market. But as you gain momentum, specializing became a lot more important. And now it would be very difficult for somebody on our team that's on the residential side to have their hands in a commercial project. They become very separate as we've grown because, like Jeff said, it's a very different client experience. It's a very different way you relate to people because these relationships typically last a lot longer. It's not you're not in Susie Joe's house for 2.5 days. You might be working with somebody for 2.5 years. So your project managers, your salespeople even become more like account executives from a relationship standpoint. And we've found value in being very specialized in our divisions.
Hey,
Okay,
Matt,
and
do you have to manage those people differently too, in terms of what motivates them and how to deal with them day to day?
Yeah, specifically. So if you think of let's just take residential sales, for example, those people, I hate when I say those people. People like that are more motivated by that quick hit. They need to get 20 sales a week or they feel like they're failing. Somebody in the commercial side may only have 40 sales a year, but the volume is that much higher, and they may go 2 months without having a sale per se, but they're negotiating along the way. So it's somebody that has that longer term outlook, doesn't need that quick dopamine hit of having a bunch of sales per week. And I think that's definitely a different personality type.
okay, so let's talk through. I want to hear from Chad as well. Chad, can you tell us a little bit about H&H? Maybe like where you guys started, where you're at today, and then I know you guys are strictly commercial. So, talk to me a little bit about your team size and kind of what the structure of that looks like over there.
Yeah, so H&H, we were established in 1932, was established by an immigrant from the Netherlands. And basically, I came on board. I was in management with Sherwin-Williams out of college for 2 years, and H&H Painting was my largest customer. And I was approached by the owner to come and work for him, basically. And so made that move. It was a leap of faith because at that point I had no field painting experience. I had 2 years of coatings background, but when I started in 98, we had probably 25 field employees, and we were doing a volume of about 2 million a year roughly. And at that time, it was just the previous owner, and we had an office manager, and that was it. I mean, there was no other office staff. So, when I come on board, we kind of started to grow. Our customers started to kind of drag us farther away from Kalamazoo, which is where we're based. Well, over time, we have a large market in Grand Rapids, which is 40 minutes away. And we currently have about 52 field employees, and 30 plus of those employees live in Grand Rapids. So that market has totally exploded for us. We're pushing 10 million a year is kind of our target. And we've grown from 5 to 6 to 8 to 9 to 10 million over the last 6, 7 years. And it's just kind of been a steady growth. And big part of that is diversifying our services. I started a floor coatings division about 8 years ago. and that was based out of the constant requests from our customers on projects that we're doing the painting. They wanted a floor done. Well, I would always have to, I would help. I had a contractor that I worked closely with, and I'd call them and I'd refer them the business and they would get the floor. And well, I just got to a point where that was not a good, I needed to expand. So we started the floors. That's now expanded to 2 million roughly in sales a year, and it's growing. So
Chad, you mentioned that you guys are pushing about 10 million. Did you say you have 52 employees?
yep.
Okay. What's can you give me a quick rundown of the makeup of that? I have a question here that I'm going to go back to for Matt, which is crew size to generate that kind of revenue. So what's that look like for you?
Is we have currently about, for the floor coating division, we have about 8 kind of dedicated floor crew members. And then we have some painters that are cross-trained into the floors, because that industry or that market is not steady. You know, it spikes a lot. You get a big floor where you need 2 to 4 to 6 additional people to coat the floor, or you get multiple projects going. So, but we have 8 dedicated to the floors. And then in the painting end, we have, I would say, 6 kind of lead foremen / superintendents that will run multiple projects. You know, they're managing 4 to 6 large commercial projects at any one time. They're also working foremen. And then we have probably another 10 foremen that will just kind of run one project. And then about 30 just kind of painters at multiple levels of, 1 to 2 year or 5 to 10 year. It just depends on, so that's kind of the makeup of our field.
Okay. And are you all W-2s, or do you have a mix of 1099s in there as well?
All W-2.
Okay. So Matt, Maggie, I'm going to bounce this back over to you now. What's your crew look like on the commercial side?
We are primarily subcontractor based on our commercial side. And it kind of the crew size depends on who's going to be our partner for certain projects. And we built great relationships with our team over the last 10 years. And similar to Chad, where it kind of depends on the project, where you've got, you might need a 2-man, 3-man crew on some projects and 15, 20 on another. And we kind of depends on our partner of how we staff that job.
Okay. I want to talk about the pros and cons of residential versus commercial. So Soren, you can participate in this one as well. Jeff, you brought up on one of our previous discussions the difference in sales tactics here, right? So on the residential side, transactional. On the commercial side, relational. Can you kind of break that down a little bit, and that might help parlay this conversation into some of the differences and the pros and cons between the two? Oh, Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry. When you're dealing with transactional sales on the residential side, it is really an event. They come in, they give an estimate, the estimate gets accepted, and generally in traditional residential, that person is pretty much done with that project, and the project manager takes over in most companies. And so, as Matt said, the kind of people that work well in that kind of selling are people that get a high on lots of activity, lots of hits, lots of success. On the commercial side, and in talking with Matt and Maggie over the years, I continue to be amazed that they built the company they have built with, a dozen or 2 main customers. And so it is not, we come in and paint your house and leave, and maybe you call us sometime in the future to paint a bathroom or not. These are relationships that are ongoing, and and are constantly evolving and hopefully growing and changing form. And so you really are dealing with it's more important to maintain those relationships and keep those people engaged and happy over the long term, because you're dependent upon them for all the business in the future. I worked with a few paint companies that have tried to make that transition, and for some of them, it's been really hard to understand the difference between that transactional sale and the relational sale. And it impacts so many different things. It impacts how you reward them, for example. If I had a purely residential painting living rooms kind of business, I would probably have my sales estimating team pretty heavily on a commission based, because it's transactions that I want them to focus on and reward them for. If I'm on a purely commercial side and I've got 6, 12, 18 main commercial customers that I'm dealing with over many, many years, I'm not as concerned about giving them high pay based on revenue brought in, but I would be compensating them more on how well they maintain those relationships, how they've grown those relationships, and so forth. So there's fundamental difference in terms of how you approach these kinds of transactional versus relational kinds of sales. It takes a different, as Matt said earlier, it takes just a very fundamentally different kind of salesperson to be good at those things. Again, across multiple industries, I've seen this time and time again, where people try to take a set of transactional sales skills that they have and think they can just apply them to a B2B relational sales, and many times it just fails miserably because they don't understand all the nuances of maintaining those relationships.
All right, so I just want to confirm something before I move on to Soren here. So, Matt, how many relationships do you typically have over the course of a given 12-month calendar year to produce what you're producing on the commercial side today?
I don't know if I can speak with data there, but it feels like it's only a couple dozen.
Okay.
I think there's probably more than that. There is some of the commercial repaint world that kind of comes and goes, but specifically with general contractors, it's less than a dozen.
And would you say most of your business comes from the GC space on the commercial side?
It's about split in the commercial side between
Okay.
repaint and new.
Got it.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go for it, Maggie.
A lot of that isn't just companies. And I think that's an important, like, you're nurturing relationships within companies. So we have a couple GCs, like I think Matt probably only oversees 3 or 4 general contracting companies. But within that, he has anywhere from 2 to 7 really key people that are a bit siloed in decision making. So just because you nurture one key relationship at a GC doesn't mean that other key relationships at that GC are also going to be nurtured in that transaction. And so within one company, there's oftentimes multiple efforts to that networking and that relationship that is atypical to, I mean, even in the new res that we do, that's not really the case. It's kind of the owner and then their PMs, but their PMs don't have a lot of control. It's a lot different in new commercial. And even some commercial repaint, which is that you have to nurture multiple relationships within one company, which has its own things.
I want to circle back to that. That's a brilliant point, Maggie. Soren, I want to give you an opportunity to jump in here as well. You are both residential and commercial. What does your sales strategy look like between the two? Do you use the same sales reps? I know you probably have a little more overlap over there. Is that correct? Oh, Soren, you're on mute. I'm going to ask you to unmute there.
Yeah, sorry. Commercial is not our forte. Probably that's why I'm listening right now. I'm trying to learn way more. Just like Maggie said, I think commercial is more about having the relation with the GC, and it's so hard to break in one. They gotta be very unhappy with who they work for so many years to break in. We do commercial. New GCs, they come in town, they don't have any relation created. It's easier for us. We do some churches right now, some smaller commercial, but anything like you're trying to get in a bigger project like hospitals or something new, huge construction, it's so hard because all these relations are created. I mean, this is my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just saying it. I think these relations are already created, and you got to fight so much harder to break those relations that they are already made. So it's way harder, I think, for us to get in a bigger, huge commercial work than residential. It's totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chad, what's your take on that? How do you guys typically break into those relationships to start with?
For us, since I've been here, I was fortunate to have a great mentor that, we've been around for a long time. I invested a lot of my time when I started to kind of get to know the customer outside of just the day to day. Hey, I want to paint your job. How much money, I would get to know them on a personal basis, whether it's playing softball leagues or bowling or whatever. And over the course of time, all those people I've grown up with are now senior project managers or vice presidents of some of our the largest construction companies in the area. And I mean, it's like Maggie was saying, within those silos, there are so many different avenues. Like we'll have one construction manager where they have 15 senior project managers, and they have, they're dealing with facilities constantly. We get more referrals from facilities from our construction managers because they need a painter. They don't have a construction project. They're calling the professionals in the industry to say, hey, we need to get our building painted or we need our floor coated. Who do we call? And we've kind of earned the position in the industry that most of the large CMs are referring us. So, and then you have within those construction companies, those PMs are all in their own world, and you might have a different PM has a different group of their favorite subs. So you have to make sure you're in all of their sub, favorites. And that's just been something that we've done a great job of, and our people that I brought in have continued to do that. And you need to be the expert in your industry to get that respect and to earn their trust.
So, Matt, does that align with your experience? Like on the commercial side, how many new relationships do you establish each year? Like, do you have a target KPI around that?
We have not really set a revenue goal around that or a company like this many new partners, because at this point we know relationally who we want to work with in our market. And it's not a really big list. And there are new entrants that come into the market, but just as we're building our reputation, we have a reputation among other contractors in town. Contractors also have their own reputation. And there's not that many that have the reputation that we want to go pursue and be partners with. So a lot of it is very selective. It might only be one or two more a year. And, it may be obvious to state this, but it doesn't take a month or two. This process can take a year or more. Like Soren said, they may have partners that they're working with, and your sales then becomes how well you can perform on a job. And that's ultimately how you can prepare yourself for the market, is you got to perform really good when you get that opportunity.
Yeah, so let's talk about like we discussed the difference in the sales process, right? It's a very, very different strategy. It's not the high volume, high velocity transactional based sales like we have in the residential side. So this is very much more about building relationships long term that can take a while to really facilitate. So let's say you win a relationship, you have an opportunity presented to yourself. Now, Matt, you've been doing this long enough. Matt and Maggie, I'm just going to refer to both of you for each of these questions here. But how would you approach that? Like, as let's say a residential contractor who may have just dabbled in commercial before, but they really want to start breaking into this, given that diversification is one avenue to help stabilize the seasonality of your business. What would be your first step? Like, you want to crush it. Is it the same exact process between residential and commercial? Do you follow, obviously the estimating is different, so maybe let's start there.
Estimating is not different. That's a misconception. You have surface area of walls, you have linear foot of trim, you have number of doors, you have square foot of ceilings, all the same things you would see in a residential project. Granted, you may have different production rates and you may have some unique substrates that you're looking at, but the process is the same. And that overwhelms a lot of people from the start. So clarifying that it's not voodoo estimating science, it's pretty basic. Sometimes it's easier, in my opinion. You end up with, $1 million job can have 4 substrates on it. That was pretty easy. But then it's all about starting small and going deep right off the bat. It's I hear these comments a lot of times like, hey, I get all these emails for bid invites. I have 100 of them a week. Should I be looking at all those? It's like, no, again, focus on who's doing the kind of projects that you can handle and find a handful of them that you want to go in deep with. And you're showing up at their job sites, you're showing up at their offices. When you're getting an opportunity, you're asking if you can sit down and go over your proposal. Like the things that I'm not doing anymore, but those are the things you need to do when you're starting out.
And I
So,
think it's
yep, go ahead.
important, let me add, if I may,
Absolutely.
understanding the administrative side that goes along with commercial, because I would argue that that sells your future work before any paintbrush is put on a job site. And so one of the ways that we've grown and been successful within a lot of our repeat commercial clients is our paperwork is on time and our paperwork is accurate. And you are going to be very surprised if you've never done commercial work, specifically new commercial. But even some of the repaint, how much goes into the contracts and the insurance requirements. For example, we just are doing a job super small for us on the commercial side. It's like a $14,000 plaster job at a mock-up at a new hotel, and we were back and forth for almost 10 days trying to get our COI per the requirements of this builder, not because we're inept, but they had certain insurance qualifications coming from their corporate office that we had never seen. And so our insurance is, so it was like such a small job, such an easy job. Everyone was aligned and on the same page, but it was probably 25 emails back and forth just for our COI to get accepted so we could get into their system. And so that level of detail and attention to administrative just nuances and details is a huge part of what wins over the client, but also makes the job successful. And you have to be ready for that. You have to be ready to respond, to fill out the paperwork, to know how to fill out the paperwork. And I think it's where relationships are won and lost from the get-go.
Yeah.
Is that why you guys recommend starting small if you move into commercial?
I usually tell people to start small because they won't have the cash flow for some of these big jobs, but the administrative piece is key. It's different for every company, what is required and what it looks like. And so it's okay to ask questions. But yes, you probably have 10 hours of paperwork throughout the course of a commercial project. And if you don't have the manpower to do that, and if you try to do that across 6 jobs all at once, then yeah, that's going to be, you're going to drown and you're going to fail, and then they're not going to call you back.
Yeah, Jeff, you brought up a really good point. There's different levels of commercial, right? I mean, you got like a hotel room, and then you have a football stadium, and there's a bunch in between that too. So, Maggie, based on where you guys are at, the fact that you have so many different levels to your company, for somebody maybe just getting started or wanting to break more and more into commercial, like where would you recommend they start?
I always encourage people to start with commercial repaint because I believe I naturally gravitate toward residential because I just like pretty design and stuff like that.
You're a glutton for
But
punishment is what it is.
I'm a glutton. Yeah, I like a challenge. But for me, doing some commercial repaint brought an understanding of the culture that is within commercial. Well, it is relational, it actually probably feels more transactional because it's not warm and fuzzy, and there's not a lot of thank yous, and there's not a lot of, we're in this together, here's your bathroom. Like, it's very much like you're expected to know exactly what you're doing. And
Maggie,
so,
that's a really good point, because and it gets back to, I think, the confusion that a lot of people have on culture and so many buzzwords that get thrown around. Yeah, relational is not we all like each other and go out and have beers together. It is the nature of the transaction is constant and taking care of a series of needs that they have from the beginning to the end to the next project, and babysitting the process itself more than the people.
yeah, for sure. And with that becomes more opportunities to understand that culture in the repaint side. It's so much more like res repaint in that it's typically an occupied space and you're painting walls. But then growing from that is always the encouragement to just start small. So finding a GC, like Matt said, that go to their website. Do they align with your core values? Does it look like they're doing the type of projects you could do? Can you get a hold of them to talk about the bid and get feedback on the bid, and know that you're going to bid for a while, and getting feedback is important, but starting with something like, a $12,000 Chipotle, or a, office tenant improvement build out, something that kind of gets your feet wet, but also helps you feel, to my point earlier, cash flow is slow and you're not going to get a deposit. No, it's not going to happen. And you're going to hold on. I shouldn't say not. I've seen it happen, but you're going to hold on to paying your crew anywhere from 30 to 90 days before you see that funding through the monthly billing. And so, yes, you bill monthly on contracts, but you're not collecting right away. And so being able to cash flow the entire project is a really important part of where you start.
What do you, Maggie, I'm going to stick with you here. What do you feel like the most important aspects of commercial are compared to residential? So when you talk about the nuances of having a good administrative process behind the scenes, knowing what questions to ask, having good cash flow, like, are there any other pitfalls that you would typically see a residential contractor fall into that they just don't know what they don't know?
Probably the first thing that comes to mind is just sheer professionalism. And so, your website needs to be a good website, and your email needs to be at yourbusinessname.com. And your team needs to know how to show up as professionals and walk into a building and, know how to go through safety, or know how to go, so there's just an elevated, I joke to our friends that are GCs in the commercial world. I'm like, y'all are so corporate. Like, and so having that mentality that, you're going to work in corporate America. And so if you're putting on your painter whites and getting a paintbrush and going into corporate America, it's going to look, feel, and act very different. And so maybe kind of understanding that elevated experience is just as important as the cash flow and the paperwork.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Um, Matt, do you have anything to add to that before I move on to Chad?
Yeah, I really feel like competency is number one. Like you have to exude not confidence, but you have to exude competency. Like you need to know whether you do or not, you need to look like you know how to do this project, because that's where they're trying to eliminate risk is schedule first and foremost, safety, quality is like last, but you need to be able to produce at their schedule, play nice with everybody else. And that's where really the being a competent manager is very important.
So, Chad, in your business over there at H&H, I imagine that you run up against bid requests that are coming from multiple angles, or you're competing against the bid per se. What makes your company different than the next commercial painting company? How do you guys stand apart?
Well, and so within that commercial space, there's different, there's the facility maintenance repaint type work like Maggie was talking about. There's the healthcare, which is kind of specialized. There's private work that the construction manager is not required to put it out to bid to 20 painting companies. They can pick a short list of 3 or 4 painting companies, or they can negotiate. The school work, I don't know, Michigan does a lot. I mean, we probably have 30 to 40 school projects every year. And it could be anything from a 2 classroom addition to a new 3-story high school to a renovation with an addition that goes for, has 7 phases for 3 years. We just, we have a like Matt was saying, we probably have 10 construction managers that we do 70% of our new commercial construction for. And, that's kind of our wheelhouse. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know how things are at in Nashville, but Matt, do you guys have do you bid a lot of general contractor bid work, or is it more construction management work?
We're probably primarily general contractor work. Not a lot of CM work here.
Okay, because like in Michigan, if it's a general contractor bid, there are multiple construction companies bidding the job, and they're requesting quotes from, if there's 10 general contractors bidding the job, each one might have 3 different painting companies that they're inviting. So the competition, the chances of success are way lower. Construction management is huge in Michigan with a lot of the public work and the larger private projects where, they have a bid invite list and you're bidding just less competition. So
that's a great reminder of a question to ask when you're building a relationship with a general contractor and you're putting a proposal together. It's like, especially if it's schools, like we don't go after schools for that reason here, because you'll get 10 GCs and 40 painting contractors bidding on one school. It's like, that's a racket. But you can ask like, hey, so and so GC, who else are you guys bidding against? And if they give you a list of 2 other people that are pretty competent and equal to them, it's like, those are pretty good chances. Or they may even say like, hey, this is a negotiated job with, they've agreed to already use us. And then you even know, hey, your chances are even better. But when you make that call and they say, yeah, it's out to public and there's 10 other GCs bidding it, I'd let somebody else have it.
that's one of the first things whenever we get a bid invite. The first thing is to figure out if they're doing it or if they're bidding it. If they're bidding it and the bid market's pretty loaded like it is now, we're saying no, thank you. But with our top 10, they do go after some GC bid work that we then have to give them a bid because we don't want them calling another painting company for that bid,
Yeah, we call that a PR bid.
Yep.
So as far as in the world of commercial, right? There's not only different levels of commercial. So I think you brought up like a Chick-fil-A style project versus going, full on with a hospital. There's also different services that you can add on there. So I know, Chad, you brought up the fact that you have floor coatings, and then there's just the standard painting as well. Do you do anything else on like the industrial front, or do you primarily stick to the substrates that are in a standard office building? What does that look like on your side, Chad?
Yeah, in the commercial world, it gets into industrial and, heavy commercial. We do vapor blasting, sandblasting. We do intumescent coating, which is a fireproofing type coating. The epoxy flooring, we do polished concrete. We do, wall coverings, which is kind of standard. But a lot of our competitors sub out their wall covering. They don't do it in house. We do everything in house. So, you with a office building, there's not much I mean, we're painting for the most part, maybe some intumescent coating, but you get into the schools and there's, just there's a lot of different variables in the kind of heavier commercial projects. So,
Yeah. And so, Matt, what does that look like on your side? Are you guys standard commercial painting? Do you get into any of that industrial floor coatings, concrete polishing, that kind of stuff?
So unfortunately, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate. We've been so busy without having to add the floor coatings that we've kind of just handled it on a case by case basis, probably similar to what Chad was doing in the past, where we just bring in a partner when one of our clients wanted us to package it. But what we've found a good niche in is two different things. One is the more decorative artistic finishes that carry over from our residential division into the commercial division. A lot of commercial contractors can't do plasters or faux finishes or even some of the higher end wall coverings that are so common in, especially in Nashville, a lot of these restaurants and hotels, and just some really unique finishes that we kind of package together in that commercial world. And then we've also kind of got a little niche in what we call sanitary coatings, but it's a lot of food processing plants around here where we're doing um, just different wall coating systems that are required for FDA standards.
So I'm jumping around here a little bit, but while we're on the topic of you, Matt, any other questions that a typical residential painting contractor might not know to ask during a bid? I know you brought up the fact that like, is this bid, is this like open to the public, or is this something that is going to be specific to what you are working with them on relational wise? Is there any other questions that they should be aware of?
I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. It's so project dependent. Just ask more questions, especially in the beginning. You might start offending people by the amount of questions you ask, but it's better to learn than to get down the road and have made a big mistake.
Yeah.
Austin, I have something to add to that.
Yeah.
So, one of the things going from residential to commercial that someone that does that will find is on a house, if it's a new house or if it's a repaint and you go there, you're going to ask, do you want the ceilings painted? Do you want the walls painted? Do you want the trim painted? On a commercial project, when you get a drawing, they're not going to tell you everything. They're not going to tell you you have to paint the steel lintels outside at all the brick lintels. They're not going to tell you you have to paint the bollards. They're not going to tell you you have to seal the concrete floors. One of the things that we've learned over the last or found over the last 10 years is architects are getting worse at their job, which is meaning they're not telling us what we have to do. And if we don't ask the questions up front, we end up fighting with our customer the whole job because they're thinking we're trying to get extras when in reality the architect didn't tell us what to do. So one of the things we do is we're one of the only, if not the only, painting company that will ask questions prior to a bid. And our customers appreciate the heck out of that because they can then go, if we get the job, we're just going to work. We're not fighting about who's caulking door frames, who's sealing the concrete floors. Oh, those ceilings don't call to paint. Well, if you ask up front and it, it just, you're building a relationship with the construction companies, and over the course of time, they'll see that.
I'll add to that too. That's what we value in a good partnership is somebody that's willing to have that scope call after you submit a bid. Once they've had a chance to get everything, it's like, hey, let's go through and make sure our expectations are correct. It's like I picked up bollards, I picked up lintels. I want to make sure everybody has that because it really isn't clear on the plans, but you're going to ask me to paint that.
Yep.
Maggie, do you have anything to add to that? Any other questions, any other things that a typical residential contractor may not know to ask or may not know that they don't know?
I don't think we talked much. I breezed over it briefly, but safety. is an important part of commercial that I'll be honest, other than what to wear for PPE, I'm not super seasoned on specific safety, but I know that again, it's something that's required. It's something that's unique for each subcontractor and oftentimes for each project, depending on the client they're working with. And so maybe Chad and Matt could speak more to it, but I feel like we as an industry forget to talk about safety, and it's such a huge part of commercial contracts. So, gentlemen.
Yep. When I started working at H&H, my daily phone calls were your guys aren't wearing their hard hat, your guys are smoking on the job. I mean, that was old world painting. Now there's no question. I mean, every employee we require them to do the 10-hour OSHA when they start. You know, their respirator fit test yearly. I mean, and that's a standard. And when you go from residential to commercial, you're going to go through that learning curve. And like Matt was saying, if you're not performing, your customer, they're not going to call you back. If you're they're trying to get a $20 million building done and they're fielding calls from their customer that your painters aren't wearing their hard hats, they're not going to put up with that long.
Yeah,
So,
and to be clear too, Austin, for the audience, like none of that stuff is hard or voodoo science or trade secret. You just gotta do a little bit of research and understand what's required. And if necessary, there's safety consultants out there in every market you can work with. And you just got to be aware that that's something you got to deal with.
yeah,
And it's important. It's not just something you deal with. It is, you want your people to come home in one piece at the end of every job.
Yep.
And these job sites are dangerous. No.
Well, that even
way
carries
around.
over to new residential when you're dealing with track building too. That safety becomes a much bigger issue. It's interesting. I'm working with the PCA and helping them get their educational programming spruced up a bit, and I was shocked at how many PCA members desperately want help in understanding safety and how to train their crews for safety. And they said it's not just commercial anymore. It's kind of bled into residential as you've gotten into track homes and retirement communities like I live in here in Florida, where it's a very long-term big process, and they follow a lot of the same rules that you do in commercial construction for safety, at least.
So this is a great point. So like if somebody was looking to break into where to start, does the PCA have enough educational material there, or is it just a matter of going to find a local resource at this point, Jeff?
The PCA has an amazing foundation of material. I think one of the challenges has been we're working with them and learning how to make it more accessible, and then as that's being done, we are rapidly expanding the content to kind of meet the current needs of the painting industry. So the PCA is an excellent source right now, and over the next 2 or 3 years is going to become the source to go to for education across the board of all the kinds of things we've been talking about today.
So I have someone in the comments here asking a question about OSHA. How many hours are required? Is it an hourly requirement, or is there a particular standards you have to go through each year? What does that look like?
So I think what he's asking is there's terminology, like you do an OSHA training and it's either a 10-hour or 30-hour or trainer. There's different levels of that. And there is not a requirement per se. It's kind of a contractor-based requirement, and states may be different state to state too. But we're a lot like Chad, where it's hey, your minimum entry here is your 10-hour training.
We'll have some projects. Actually, I have a project right now that they're requiring my site foreman to have a 30-hour OSHA. And we have a few that have it based on a job requirement, but that's something you kind of have to deal with on a base-to-base, job-to-job basis. I think that 10-hour OSHA certification, Austin, it would give these residential contractors a baseline. OSHA, that has everything they would ever need to know about job safety requirements. The 10-hour OSHA is kind of a pretty inexpensive and low investment of time to get a baseline of what is commercial construction safety requirements.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
we put all of our commercial painters as well as the crew leads for residential through OSHA 10. And, for those listening that aren't familiar, there are third-party organizations that will do this. You just have to find a place and bring the people. And so, again, this isn't something you have to lift yourself and learn it all so that you can regurgitate it to your people. There's organizations that will come in and host the training. They'll do the respirator test, they'll do the lift training, they'll do this, the CPR, all that stuff. So you don't have to do it yourself.
Yeah. So smart. Leverage your local community and your local network. All right. I'm going to ask a kind of an open-ended question here from Mike. What barriers to entry are there for commercial work relating to contracts, documentation, employees, subs, anything else different between that and the residential market? Maggie, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, a big barrier to entry to get started is pre-qualification. And so you do have to complete, for the majority of commercial work, you have to submit pre-qualification paperwork, which can be light and it can be extensive, and that's not consistent across companies. But you're showing reviewed financial statements, which requires a third-party accountant to review your financials. It's showing bonding limits, insurance package. So basically it's saying that you are a stable enough company for them to rely on you to finish this job and not abandon them or go bankrupt. And so for us, when we started, Matt had a lot of connections to commercial. It was very low hanging fruit, but it took us I don't know, probably 12 to 16 months to be able to truly do a commercial job, because we didn't have the bank statements. We didn't have, we didn't have all the things that you have to submit for pre-qualification. So it's a very immediate low barrier to entry is, can you fill out this paperwork? Can you show your financials? Can you submit all the insurance and bonding limits?
And there's some cost with that. And that's something you
Yes.
have to understand moving into this. It's not, a free and open process of going from residential to commercial. Getting your financial statements reviewed costs money every year. It's not like an audit, but it's a junior audit, and your CPA is going to charge you for that, and all the insurance and things you have to have all of this ready and in place in advance, as Maggie says, and so that there's a big barrier financially with those things. Not big, there is a barrier there. The big barrier is what Maggie said earlier. It's cash flow to fund the project. You've got to make sure you have cash flow somewhere to fund that project from beginning to end without a check coming in. So it's either cash in your bank or available lines of credit that you can draw upon. And because if you don't, you can fall into financial hardship quickly. So those are big barriers.
Austin, I
Now,
want to make something clear too. I
yep.
think the last 30, 45 minutes, we've gone down this rabbit hole of like, these are all the things that are really hard. And that's not achieving the goal of booking yourself for winter. So if people commit to getting into the commercial world, it's a great place to be. I would just say you can't dabble in it. You can't just try to jump in. You can't just stick your toe in it. This is a commitment you have to make. You have to be willing to work in it for a year or two before you really say that it's not for you. And that graph you showed at the beginning is true. We have very little seasonal ups and downs. There's some, but it's not like your residential repaint only companies. I think, Chad, you can probably even agree with that, being in Michigan, that yeah, you slow down a little bit in the winter, but it's nowhere near what your residential guys are doing.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, in Michigan, they kind of gear construction around that, to where when they're breaking ground, they're trying to get enclosure by November so they can do their build out. So yeah, definitely. it it will level off your spikes in seasonality for sure.
It's a great vertical within the painting industry to be in, and we enjoy it and we have learned to do well in it. But yeah, I think to Matt's point, you have to commit to it. You have to put on your corporate hat and be willing to professionalize and be ready for, the benefits and the new experiences that come with commercial.
Chad, anything else that you want to add on to barriers to entry? Because Matt brought up a good point. Like, once you get over those barriers, there's a big opportunity here, right? Now, those barriers are a good thing in the same sense that like it prevents a lot of the low, like 95% of the residential market from making it into this side of the industry, right? But yeah, Chad, anything else that you want to add to that barrier to entry list? Anything that a typical contractor may not know that they don't know?
I would say in the commercial world, you really have to, your technical knowledge needs to be higher than residential, just based on the existing conditions of commercial buildings, facilities, the different coatings. So I would recommend any residential to do some homework on brushing up their just technical knowledge of coatings. And there's a lot of resources out there. MPI, Master Painter Institutes, they have, like 30, 40-hour certifications you can get that gear around uh, commercial repainting and just anything from surface prep to the different types of coatings, when to apply them, when to use them. So that would be huge for somebody making the transition.
So good. I want to get to a few more questions before we break for today, guys. I appreciate all your time here, by the way. Net profits. I'm assuming that's what we're talking about here. What do you net in commercial? How does that compare to residential? Is it different? Is it just the same but bigger? Matt, Maggie, do you want to take that one?
So net's not any different. I wouldn't do it if the net was different. You got to look at your overhead in a little bit different strategy. Uh, if you're used to spending 5%, 10% of your revenue in marketing costs, you don't have that in the commercial world. So a lot of your overhead marketing cost is this estimating, or it's this safety stuff, or it's whatever it is. So you're it's the same.
Yeah, that's Chad. What do you guys look for net wise? Do you have a particular percentage you aim for? Like I guess maybe just margins in general.
Yeah, I mean, 30% margin would be, I'd take that all day long.
Great. And guys, as far as estimating commercial projects, do you have any special software you use for that?
We use Stack. It's there's a plethora of them out there now, but that's just the one that we've used that I'm become familiar with.
Chad, yep.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Chad, how about you? Are you guys using anything over there on the estimating side?
Transitioning, we're old school. We have just signed up with Toggle AI and been working with them for about a month to get to the online takeoffs, and that's something Keegan in our office has been focused on. And I think that's going to be a good transition for us. We're behind the curve on that.
You'll
And
be happy, Chad.
What's that?
You'll be happy, Chad.
I just from what I'm seeing, I will be. I won't be doing takeoffs at night anymore.
and Soren, I want to get to you as well, man. On the estimating side, on commercial, are you guys using anything different from on the residential side, or how are you guys handling that today?
Just like Matt said, it's the same surface, same wall, same ceiling. We just measure is that much per surface. Nothing different. It would be less. We wouldn't do it. We don't want to make less money and be more complicated. It's straightforward. We use the same measurement and same pricing.
Awesome. And I want to just go around the room quickly here. For anybody who might be listening in who's interested in breaking more into the commercial side, we've talked about the barriers. We've talked about what's over the barriers and why that might be worth chasing. Jeff, you speak to a number of contractors. You're part of the PCA. What would you like if you had to scream one thing from the rooftop for anybody who might be interested in getting into the space to hear? Like, what would that be?
Yeah, I would tell them to get to places like the PCA where they can build relationships and learn from other people, learn from their mistakes and their successes.
Yeah, so good. Uh, Maggie, I'm gonna move on to you. Any last words for the group here?
If you have the cash, invest in your people and invest in the training. We've learned a lot from the PCA and we've learned a lot from the community of it, which included going and visiting other shops, digging into sending our team to events and those types of things. And I think that has really elevated our ability to not only produce this stuff, but grow in our production of it.
Matt, how about you?
Same thing as what's been said already. This isn't a new thing. We're not the first people doing commercial painting, so rely on other people in different markets that are willing to share. There's no trade secrets when you're in Boise, Idaho, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
And as an outsider, I'll tell you, it's an industry that is willing to share if you get into the right place. People are very, very willing to help.
Yeah, and we've mentioned the PCA here a couple times. For anybody listening in, PCA Expo, it's February. It's going to be in Orlando. It's my favorite venue. I will say the one in Colorado last year was pretty damn good.
That was awesome.
Hey, the
Yeah.
commercial one is in 2 weeks in San Diego. Still not too late for that.
There we go. Yeah, so if anybody's interested, go jump on that event. We are actually taking all of our clients to Disney World again in February. So great time of the year to be down there. If you can't make it in 2 weeks in San Diego. Chad, I'm gonna move on to you. Any last words for the group on the commercial side?
Yeah, I would say start if they're wanting to break in, go after property managers, repaints. If get comfortable with that world before you start diving into the construction. I think there's just it's an easier way to get your feet wet without complications.
Awesome. And Soren, I appreciate you jumping on here, man. Last minute. You guys are both res and commercial. Anything you want to like part ways with for anybody listening in here who may be interested in jumping to commercial side? Any roadblocks, any hurdles, anything that you want to leave the group with today?
The same idea as Chad and everybody else. I would say it's much easier to get in a commercial painting when it's an existing building, when you can see it. Most of them, they let you go see the building. As for starting commercials, so you have an idea, you don't miss anything. Once you get in more complicated, the building that's not existent, you gotta know to read a little bit better plans. There are some tricks over there. You gotta make sure you're asking the right questions. Yeah, much easier to start with properties that they are existing.
Thank you for that, Soren. And guys, I've one other question here I just overlooked. Maybe Matt or Chad, if you guys want to take this. Do you guys have any scheduling issues working with multiple GCs?
We're a scheduling company that happens to paint.
I agree. I still do the scheduling for us. It's the money maker. Honestly, it's all day, every day.